Part 1, Chapter 2 of Short History of the Christian Church by John Fletcher Hurst. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 1, Chapter 2 The Scenes of the Labors of the Apostles. The Acts of the Apostles are the chief source of information concerning the fields of work of the different apostles. But the epistles of Paul and his associates contain frequent statements which serve to supply missing links in that more formal history. To these may be added the supplementary accounts of writers from the 2nd century to the 4th, many of which, however, are only vague suppositions or impressions which existed in oral form in the early Church. Peter represented the Jewish type of Christianity. He was slow to learn that Christianity was designed for all men. Pentecost should have been enough, but even this great lesson did not satisfy his intensely Jewish character. After important labors in Palestine, extending as far north as Antioch, he came to the council in Jerusalem. Here, at the moment of supreme test, he wisely changed his position, and united with Paul in removing all Jewish ceremonials as a condition of entrance into the Church. Henceforth all bonds with Judaism were broken, and Jews and Gentiles became Christians on precisely the same terms. There are good reasons to suppose that Peter made an evangelistic tour through portions of Asia Minor, for his first epistle intimates previous labors in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, the province, and Bithynia. He also says that at the time of writing he was in Babylon. If this was the Babylon on the banks of the Euphrates, and we believe it was, he was, no doubt, attracted thither by reason of the large Jewish population resident there. It seems to have been understood by him and Paul that he should confine his labors to the East, while Paul should occupy himself with the West. There is no historical proof that Peter founded the Church in Rome, or that he was ever there. His residence there is not mentioned by the earliest writers in their lists of the first bishops of the western metropolis. The first mention was by Dionysius of Corinth, A.D. 170, who speaks of Peter's death in Rome. The concurrent later testimony of the early Christian writers as to his residence and death there is worthy of credit. But while we are without definite proof of Peter's presence in Rome, it is not impossible that he did spend a brief period there, and that he died about the year 67 in the persecution under Nero. There is, however, not the least foundation for the belief that Peter was ever bishop of the Church. Paul towers far above all the apostles in the majesty of his character, the scope of his genius, the depth of his learning, and the sublime quality of his labors. Educated in both Jewish and pagan learning, after his miraculous conversion he became an apostle, in every sense able to cope with the antagonism of the combined foes of his age. His call was to the Gentiles. He made 3 great missionary tours. The first was begun in A.D. 44 and embraced Cyprus and then Asia Minor, where he visited Perga, Pisidia, Antioch, Iconium, Lystra, and Derbe. Paul's second missionary journey began A.D. 48. He went northward through Syria into Asia Minor, and visited Cilicia, Phrygia, Galatia. He then crossed the Aegean Sea into Macedonia. He began his European ministry in Philippi, and went thence southward into Greece as far as Corinth. From thence he went to Ephesus and returned to Jerusalem. He entered upon his third tour A.D. 52. He went again into Asia Minor, taking Galatia, Phrygia, and Troas on the way. He then crossed into Macedonia and Illyricum. He returned to Troas, and, passing by the Aegean islands, proceeded back to Jerusalem. Here he was arrested and taken a prisoner to Caesarea, where he was 2 years in confinement. He appealed for justice to Caesar and was taken to Rome. He remained there from A.D. 59 to 61. He was now released, and, as we believe, entered on a fourth tour, embracing a visit to Crete, Macedonia, Corinth, Nicopolis, Dalmatia, and Asia Minor. He was a second time arrested and taken to Rome. He suffered martyrdom in Nero's reign, a.d. 66. John represented the mediating element between Judaism and paganism. His attachment and scene of labor seem to have been, for the first 20 years after Pentecost, chiefly in Palestine. He was present at the council in Jerusalem, a.d. 50. For 20 years, or until a.d. 70, we lose sight of him entirely. The probability is that he labored in the valley of the Tigris and Euphrates, with Babylon as the center, and returned to Jerusalem, whence he fled to Ephesus on the capture of that city by Titus. We find him now in Ephesus. His residence was intermitted by his exile to the island of Patmos. He died in Ephesus about a.d. 98, when about 100 years old. The labors of the other apostles are largely matter of conjecture, derived from the writings of Hegesippus, Eusebius, and Nicephorus, who framed their suppositions from the floating oral traditions in the Christian communities. James the Elder suffered martyrdom in Jerusalem about a.d. 44. James, our Lord's brother, preached in Jerusalem, and finally died there a martyr. It was believed that Philip labored in Phrygia, Simon Zelotes in Egypt and the neighboring African coast, Thomas in India, Andrew in Scythia, Asia Minor, Thrace, and Greece, Matthias in Ethiopia, Judas, called Labaeans or Thaddeus, in Persia, and Bartholomew in Lycaonia, Armenia, and India. The uncertainty as to fields of labor of most of the apostles is one of the marvels of the Scriptures. One fact is clear, however, that the trend of the world's Christian life was westward. On the distribution of the gospel into the more stable parts of the Roman Empire, we have full light in the accounts of Paul's labors. All the just and vital interests of Christianity centered in that one man's work. Rome was to be the point of departure for the sowing of the truth in the north and farther west. Here Paul brought his life and labors to a triumphant close. But with his martyrdom he had only begun his work. His example and writings, and the two are inseparable, have been, ever since, the permanent and necessary treasures of the Church. The present current of the truth is a reversal of the old order. It is from the fields then barbarous and largely unknown to the geography of those times towards the old East. What the apostles could only begin will be completed, in the Eastern countries, by the laborers sent out from the warm heart of Western Protestantism. End of chapter 2.